Welcome back from lunch. Our next talk is from Erin and Kirill. Please introduce yourselves and take it away, and I'll be back for questions at the end of the session.
Awesome. Thanks.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our talk, Cloud Custodian and Microsoft Azure, to do and not to do. It will be presented to you by me, Kirill Logachev, Principal Engineer at Stacklet.
And me, Erin Welch, also Principal Engineer at Stacklet.
We worked together at Microsoft before we joined Stacklet, where our team was tasked to expand Cloud Custodian from being a single cloud tool for AWS to a multi-cloud tool by adding support for Azure. We have both worked with Azure users in the past to demonstrate the custodian capabilities that could help them improve their cloud health, and we're here today to do the same thing for you. Real quick, Cloud Custodian for Azure 101. First of all, it is released as a separate C7n_Azure package, has hard dependency on C7n, so will be installed automatically. It supports all authorization methods we found, Azure CLI, which is great for the local development or running custodian from your dev box, the service principal credentials, which is the primary authentication for automated scenarios, and the managed identity, which allows you to go secretless when running from the Azure infrastructure. It is also fully compatible with Cloud Custodian reporting and tools like C7n.org and C7n Mailer. Okay, let's start with something simple that is required nearly at any company. Security. You don't want your VMs to have ports wide open. A fair question would be, can I do this with native cloud tools? Short answer is yes, but there is a catch. As you can see, here is the snippet from the Azure built-in Azure policy that ensures that the port 22 is not open to the internet. You can see that Azure policy analyzes specific rules and from the network security group, and it works with them as with strings. So it cannot treat them as a collection as same way as network security groups treats them under the cover. If you want to block specific port or all ports, it can be done with Azure policies, but if you have list of ports that should remain open or some interesting configuration, it gets real tricky. Cloud Custodian policy treats all rules in network security groups as a whole and builds a full map of open-closed ports, same way as the resource would build it. Also, some things you can see in Azure policy were not available 3 years ago when this capability was originally built. This is similar policy, Cloud Custodian policy, that will find all NSGs that have ports 22 to 24 open, and it will close them. Now we have a short demo. So you can see we have the network security group that has a set of weird rules. So the rule that allows access to all the ports, the two rules that will block access to ports 0 to 30 and 35 to 65.535, and then the other rule that opens, for some reason, ports 20 to 25. And our goal is, with the previous policy that you just saw on the screen, is to ensure that ports 22 to 24 are closed. This is custodian policy that we saw in the previous screen.
Yeah, and I recorded this, so I needed to activate my custodian account here. So Kirill gets to just twiddle his thumb while he watches.
Yeah, as you can see on the screen, same way as it works for AWS, same syntax for Azure. The only difference is the resource name is Azure dot. It uses Azure CLI identification, which is great when running from the local box. And you can see that it found a single network security group and closed those ports. And here's the rule that was created by the custodian. Okay, next slide. So another popular ask we heard from different customers was related to the firewall configuration. Combination of value filter and the firewall rules filter allows you to identify resources accessible from unknown places. This example, we will find all the Azure storage accounts and filter them if they either have firewall disabled or if it is improperly configured. We can specify all IP addresses that are allowed to access the storage within your network, virtual network, or the public internet. The firewall rules filter is available for SQL, Cosmos, Storage, Key Vault, and if you have any other resources in mind that's not currently supported, we encourage you to file an issue so we can add the support for them. Okay, I promise that's the last one network-related policy, but this is a good illustration of how Cloud Custodian helps to fulfill gaps of native offerings. Might be common in some companies to prohibit creation of virtual machines that have a public IP address. One trick there is that the virtual machine resource model contains only network interface resource ID. So you need to have the custom code that fetches the proper network interface card model. And this example illustrates the custom filter that allows you to filter your virtual machines based on the properties of the network interfaces that are attached to this virtual machine. I haven't checked it recently, but that is something that was not possible at all with Azure policies because they did not support the capabilities to filter based on the related resources. And now Erin will tell you a little bit about our cost savings capabilities.
Yeah. All right. So the title of the slide, How We Once Saved Our Team $20K per month, is true. And we actually did it with one custodian policy. And since everyone likes to save money, I'll show you what the policy that I wrote, basically. So this is a very powerful custodian filter for Azure. It's the metrics filter. And in this example, this small policy will query all your AKS clusters or VMs and check their average CPU consumption rate. If it's under a certain threshold, in this example, it's 5%. Azure basically says if it's less than 5%, there's really probably not anything that you're computing on it. You might be paying for the resources you don't need. Either that means it's over-provisioned or some test instance nobody is using anymore. And we came from a team before that did a lot of experimental projects. And so it was very easy to spin up a bunch of resources and kind of forget about them. And you could be accruing a lot of cost just by spinning up expensive resources and forgetting. So that was what the case was. Someone had a big AKS cluster that had been sitting there for 6 months not used. And so we just, went to the resource owner, we're like, you might want to shut that off. And there we go. We saved 20K. The metrics filter allows you to add filters based on metrics available from Azure Monitor. Azure provides great documentation on all the available metrics per resource type. And so it's a great resource to get ideas to build more powerful policies. That one that I built, it took me a minute. I was like, okay, let's see what ones might, provide some cost saving as we were dog fooding custodian. Yeah, super simple, super powerful filter. So highly recommend checking that out. So if you know about on-off hours, you might know that Azure has some built-in capabilities to turn on and off your VMs on a schedule. So you probably don't need Cloud Custodian for this. However, there are other expensive resources where C7N can help minimize the cost by scaling them down when nobody's using them. One of the most expensive Azure resources is Cosmos DB. And honestly, a lot of people get really confused about the pricing and how to figure out how, what their collection is going to cost and such. And we had a customer who extensively used them in production. And as a result, they had a lot of dev instances because a lot of developers, had to spin up their own test environments. So they actually reached out and asked us if we could provide an on and off hours paired with Cosmos DB. So that's what we did. And I'm going to go ahead and show you a demo of that. And so it actually takes two policies. And what I'm about to show you here is that this Cosmos DB instance has one collection. It's the KubeCon MongoDB, and you can see the throughput's at 800 RUs. And there's no tags yet. And I'm showing you that because the policy will save some state on a tag later. So this is the policy, and what it's going to do is it's going to go and find all of your Cosmos DB collections. Now you could have multiple collections on a Cosmos DB instance, and the one that I showed you only has one, but it will fetch all of the Cosmos DB instances. And we filter by anything greater than 400. So you might have a threshold that you care about, and you're going to save the current throughput, so the current RUs, on a state tag, and I'm calling that KubeCon-resize. And then what we'll do as another action is we're going to replace the offer with a lower throughput. So that's why we're filtering. I mean, let's find all the ones that are greater than 400 and, resize them down to 400 RUs. So again, as Kirill said, Custodian works basically the same for Azure as it does for AWS. We'll run the policy. And then basically in real time, you'll go back. We'll head back and see the overview, and you can see immediately that the throughput dropped down to 400 RU. So that was replaced. And then we go to the tags, and you can see that the tag, and it doesn't show like the actual, like what the RUs were. It's an encoded basically size. And if you were to have multiple collections in your one instance, it encodes multiple RUs and remembers which basically collection belongs to which RU. So now we're going to go ahead and restore it. It's back on. Developers are back in the office. And the restore is a nice and small policy. Basically, the only thing you need to keep in mind is just to reuse that same state tag name. Those need to match. And we'll go back. Overview, we'll go ahead. You'll see it's back at 800. So that's the demo there. That can save a lot because Cosmos DB does accrue costs quite significantly and quite fast. All right, so another example of efficient cost savings is an actual cost filter. You can query costs for a specified period for nearly any resource type that Custodian supports. This example illustrates a policy that is useful in test environments. It queries all resource groups and filters down to resource groups that cost more than $10 per day. Depending on your company and usage patterns, you can identify threshold values. But the idea behind the policy is to ensure people use expensive SKUs not by accident. As an example, if someone needs a Cosmos DB but accidentally provisions a larger instance, it'll be reflected on daily resource group costs. Second part of the policy is an ability of tagging the reference resource properties. So you can find expensive resource groups and also put their daily costs onto the tag. It might be useful to tag the last 30 days to get a quick view of spending without going to a cost UI. You can also provide ways to override this, like tag it with a specific value to exclude from the results of this policy. So third very popular category of custodian policies are to ensure resource tag compliance. The especially cool thing about this policy I'm going to show is this is 1,000,000 times more difficult in AWS. So lucky you to all you Azure users out there that don't need to come up with a policy per resource type. This is because Azure has the notion of ARM resource, a basic set of properties available for all resources that include the type, location, tags, and name. So this is a very simple but powerful policy that will append created by tags for all resources. It makes a best effort attempt to identify creator by looking at activity log. The log has 90 days of data, so it's not very useful to tag old resources, but great for tagging of newly created resources. This actually is just going back 10 days in the logs. But yeah, so like this for your org, if you need to add the creator, email on any of your resources, you only have to write one for Azure, which is really handy for, if you have specific resources that you want to reach out to the owner, is like mentioning you need to delete this, or you need to reconfigure it for security purposes or whatnot. You have one small, simple policy. Also, an important filter is a resource type filter. So last time we checked, Azure has about 65,000 ARM resource types. So you might not actually want to tag all resources, but you can still use one policy to tag the resources that you do want to. So with this filter, you can scope it down to the specific resource types. For example, this one is just going to go ahead and tag the virtual networks, storage accounts, and virtual machines. Again, just so simple. And last but not least, this is more of an fun thing that one of our peers actually ran in our subscription. And at least for us, it was our dev environment. But basically, it's the ultimate in security and cost savings with one simple policy. But we do not recommend you do this at home. And this policy is basically a way to nuke your subscription. Kind of like, I don't know if any of you are AWS users and have had to utilize AWS Nuke. This will destroy all your resources you pay for in your subscription. And what it does is it goes and fetches all of your resource groups and it deletes your resource group. And as you know, if you're an Azure user, if you delete a resource group, it deletes all the resources in the group. And so the fun part about it is that it's an async delete. So it's a fire and forget mode. So all you can do is watch as your resources disappear if you accidentally run this policy. Personally, I find this policy useful. I'm like in AWS, I've kind of shot myself in the foot a few times and deleted my Terraform state file, which makes it really painful to go in and delete all of your AWS resources. But with Azure, it just takes like 4 lines and there you go. You got them all deleted. So this is everything we've prepared for you today. We hope you enjoyed the presentation, and now we're ready to accept any questions. I believe George is going to come back.
Yes. Just going to say fire and forget with the asynchronous delete. Like I forgot and got fired.
Yeah.
Any questions? Rohit has a sort of question. Says, what order are they deleted in? Whatever is the most important, surely.
That's a great.
Pretty sure it's alphabetical, whatever the API gives us.
Yeah. There's also a dependency tree, so it'll delete, resources depending on, the dependency tree as well. So.
Got you. Okay, well, we have about 7 minutes for questions. And there is a little bit of a delay, so any comments while we wait for the questions to come in? I'm like constantly refreshing the Q&A section. Here we go. Rajbir, I hope I got that right, asks, is there an option to delete all resources in a given VPC in AWS? Oh, that seems like a generic question and not for this session specifically. Let me see. I will like it and see if I can get someone to answer your question.
That would be a good question for more experienced AWS person.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. If there is, I'd like to know too.
But
that's what I figured.
Yeah,
You
and then
have a policy
filter
for each
down.
resource. Yeah. So that's why it's so much easier to delete some things in Azure.
Yeah, I think that's what the group is agreeing to. Any questions from the crowd? I guess is there anything else you'd like to share on Azure? I know we talked a little bit about what's coming up in 2022. Like what's we don't have any questions, so let me just grill you. What are you looking forward to most in 2022 for Azure?
I think we have one question on Q&A. Do you want to read it, George?
Yep. AISS, maybe out of scope. Do you make policies controlling how users can edit tags? I've had to try these approaches, but devs have pretty open access to stuff to start so they can tweak their tags.
From what I remember, unfortunately, there is no easy way to control this. Like, if they can edit tags, you cannot prohibit them from edit any tags. The one thing unrelated to Custodian, you can look at Azure Resource Graph, because this is the tool that maintains some history. So at least you can see if there were any tag changes over time.
I hope that answers your question. I'll give you another minute for a follow-up if you have one. Trying to get the QA tab to refresh faster, but it's not. Oh, they say thanks.
As far as what we're looking for too for Azure,
Yeah.
I would just say I'd love more of the community to even let us know what they're interested in as far as support in Azure. We have, so many more resources that we can add, and we'd just be curious to see how people want to use it and get more Azure community in here. We're a little biased that we're all about Azure, so we want to find our little Azure friends out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you're listening in on the video, definitely click on the link to the user survey that we have. Make sure that it's in like the YouTube description if you end up watching that there, so that you can give Erin and Kirill the feedback. Got time for one or two more questions if we want to. I'm going to go. I see the chat is hopping. All right, then. I guess this will wrap it up. We'll give it a minute break for everyone. Tabayo, refill your caffeine. And let's see who's next. John with pattern filtering with policies in Amazon EventBridge. So thanks, Kirill. Erin, any last comments or?
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
And thanks for talking.